Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our next session of the Local Infrastructure Hub. I'm Tom Cochran, the CEO and Executive Director of the United States Conference of Mayors here in Washington, D.C. Our session today is co-hosted by the Conference and Results for America and is supported by our funders, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Balmer Group, Emerson Collective, Ford Foundation, and the Kresge Foundation. Today, we will review an extremely popular program within the United States Department of Transportation, RAISE, R-A-I-S-E, Rebuilding American Infrastructure and Sustainability and Equity. Through President Biden's leadership, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law funded RAISE for $1.5 billion for fiscal year 2022, with 4 more years to follow. And the Department of Transportation recently announced the winners for this year. Today, we'll hear from 2 important and distinguished Department of Transportation officials who will give us insights into the competitive nature of these projects. And our hope is these insights will help you better position your city to win in future rounds that are coming. And we'll also hear from 2 mayors who are winners, Tucson Mayor Regina Romero and Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown. Our MC today for today's sessions is Jamie Lovin of Bloomberg Philanthropies, whose leadership and support has made the Local Infrastructure Hub possible. Jamie, thank you for all the work that you do on Hub, and the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Tom, for that kind introduction. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law more than doubled funding for the RAISE program to advance projects that make our transportation system safer and more accessible, affordable, and sustainable. The goal of today's session is to provide you with the tools, case studies, and resources to transform your city's transportation systems and submit a competitive RAISE application. In addition to learning about the RAISE program, we're going to hear from USDOT officials about the calendar of funding opportunities for 2023 that's in development. Before we welcome our first speaker, I want to highlight a resource from our last session, which brought together mayors and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo to discuss the importance of effective workforce development strategies. Please visit the link in the chat to download the Hub's 5 winning strategies for leveraging these federal infrastructure dollars to meet workforce development and job creation goals in your city. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our 2 special guests, Charles Small and John Augustine. Charles is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Intergovernmental Affairs at the U.S. Department of Transportation, and John is the U.S. Department of Transportation's Director of Infrastructure Finance and Innovation. We're thrilled to welcome you both to the Hub. The Zoom is yours.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Jamie, for having us. Tom, always good to see you as well, and it's always incredibly great to be with our friends in local government. I've actually just spent the day with Secretary Buttigieg here at the Partnership for Public Service, where I'm broadcasting to you from right now. We just finished our very first all appointees gathering here as a department. Obviously, COVID has made some of these things a little odd for us to do, but it was really great to be with the secretary this morning, and he sends his greetings. So we are really excited to be moving into year 2 of implementation for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. But of course, it never hurts to review where we have what we have done over the last year, which includes obligating over $180 billion from the various departments, including the Department of Transportation. And I think we're about $140 billion of that total over the last year or so. And through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, we've been able to have an impact on over 7,000 projects in about 4,000 communities. And what we are, I think, actually now learning, particularly through USDOT's formula dollars, is that project number may actually end up being in the 20 to 30,000 project range. So that just really gives you a sense of the depth and the level of impact that we are starting to see because of the leadership of President Biden in partnership with our folks in Congress. You're also starting to see signage go up for the bipartisan infrastructure law. I know I've been working very closely with mayors around the country on the guidance that we have issued for signs, and we're starting to see them pop up in different places around the country. So would encourage you, if you have received a discretionary grant, or your transit agency or airport or port has received, or whether it's a water project, has received even any formula funding. These are all ripe opportunities to better communicate on what the impact of this law is having. And this is not coming from me. This is not coming from the secretary. This is something that the president would like to see us do all around the country. As we kind of enter into year two, we're starting to learn some things. I'm sure it was an incredible learning experience for our friends in local government, but it was also an incredible learning experience for us here at USDOT. And just to put a finer point, at least on the first topic of discussion, which is the RAISE program, which I know local governments are incredibly familiar with from the time it was born as the Tiger program. I think one of the things we're starting to learn at a high level is really around project readiness. And what we're seeing is, and this probably not only applies to RAISE, but across the board to a lot of our discretionary grant programs, is that we got a lot of great ideas, but some projects aren't quite ready to enter in that federal pipeline quite yet. So as you get with your teams and really think about, what am I going to go after for year two in terms of discretionary grant funding for my transportation needs, really thinking and drilling down on the project readiness side is going to be incredibly important. I'll say the other big thing that I would just recommend for folks as they're thinking through the approach. I think in kind of year one, we just kind of told everyone, throw everything at us. Let's just throw the kitchen sink at us, and let's figure out what kind of comes through that process. I think as we start to think about year two, what we're going to really want to know in terms of this process is, what are your priorities? Is your Safe Streets and Roads for All grant your big priority this year? Is your Reconnecting Communities grant your big priority for this year? Is your RAISE grant your big priority for this year? So we can kind of better understand how we can kind of meet the more immediate needs of your constituents as we're heading into year two. But just saying on RAISE here for a minute, we do have the incredible John Augustine here, who is, I think now, your team, John, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have done now 600 RAISE debriefs or something like that in order to give people a better sense of what they can do better for next year. So I know you guys are hard at work right now, and we kind of have the NOFO out. I know we may be making some updates soon, but John, if you could maybe give some additional color just on what you saw over the last year, and
Sure.
anything you can share with the mayors on the line here on what they can do before the February 28th deadline.
Certainly. Thank you, Charles. And thank you, Tom and Jamie, for the introduction. Great context setting. As Charles mentioned, definitely a very popular competitive program. Looking at last year's numbers, just to give you a sense, we at the department received 936 eligible RAISE applications, hence the number of debriefs that Charles mentioned. So yes, I think I don't think we're quite at 600. We're in the upper 500s. You might have had a later update than I did, Charles, but we were getting close to 600, may have hit it. So very, very popular. Of those applications that we actually evaluated, those were the eligible ones. We advanced 303 to the secretary for consideration. The secretary was able to select 166 of those for award. So you can tell out of 936, 166 winners, that's a great number for RAISE, generally. However, we know that there's just a lot of demand out there. It's very oversubscribed, and we want everyone to be winners. So having additional funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law has been great. We have a lot more programs, as Charles mentioned. Sometimes that does make it a little difficult for the mayors and the local governments to figure out which is the best program to apply to. And so we understand that that's a challenge. And we've said, if you think you're eligible for both and it's not clear, please apply. We do not penalize applicants for applying in multiple programs. We know you have multiple eligibilities, and given the numbers that I just quoted, we know that there's a high likelihood that you may not be successful for every submission. So look for as many opportunities as you can. We make our leadership aware that if it's submitted in 2 programs, we make them aware of that. Sometimes they're able to select it in one and not the other, so that flexibility is helpful. Charles did mention the project readiness. Just for for the folks that have applied to the RAISE program, that we have a risk rating. And so we look at a low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. And that is the risk of a project getting to a signed grant agreement by the obligation deadline. And we know that there's several years of leeway we have in these programs. However, the longer the list of activities that is required to get to permitting, maybe it's right-of-way acquisition or working with a railroad for access to the right-of-way, the type of NEPA review that's involved, is a full EIS, is there wetlands, is there sensitive environmental issues. So we factor in all of those issues to see how long is it really going to take the applicant to get to a scope, schedule, and budget, and give us the ability to sign that grant agreement. And if it's too close to the obligation deadline, that raises the risk. So anything you can do to advance the project readiness, that does help. The other good thing is, as Charles mentioned, we do have a NOFO light published tomorrow. Knock on wood, that's our stated deadline to provide the full notice of funding opportunity with the full details. So I think we are on track to have that published tomorrow. So keep your eyes peeled. But generally speaking, the notice that you've seen now, we did not change the statutory criteria. It's generally going to be the same approach that you've seen last year. So applications that you already have ready should be able to be resubmitted. We're not going to add new criteria or delete criteria or make you do a whole new approach. It's generally going to be the same. We will do the webinars like we've done in the past to walk you through whatever's changed. Just make sure you understand how to submit. We'll do benefit cost analysis. We'll have specific, maybe some tribal and rural to talk specifically about those kind of projects. It might be a little bit more unique. And we'll do a number of them, and we will record them and put them on the website. And they're interactive, so we'll answer questions in real time. Usually, when we write these notices of funding opportunity, we're not always in your shoes of trying to read it and understand it. So if there's something that's unclear, usually it's unclear to a lot of people, and it gives you an opportunity to ask those questions, get the clarification. Anything that we can answer, we'll circle back to our lawyers, our leadership, get a policy answer, and then we'll publish it on the website to make everyone aware of what that is. So as you're writing your applications, you can check back and see what we've posted there to give you real good guidance. A couple other things just to give everyone a quick rundown. A lot of the elements from last year in terms of equitable split between urban and rural, 50% of the funds will be split between urban and rural again this year. We also have the set aside for planning grants. Last year, we funded $163 million in planning grants and almost $2.1 billion in capital construction. We do have a set aside for areas of persistent poverty, at least 15 million. So again, we'll be doing that. You'll see that the criteria are going to be the same. We'll have some changes and some updates on how we define some of the criteria, what we count in terms of what's competitive. But generally speaking, projects that meet multiple criteria are going to be more competitive than, let's say, a safety only program. And so we have some, Safe Streets for All and programs that are safety focused. RAISE, the nice thing about RAISE, as you all may know, the majority of the funds go to local governments instead of state UTs. We have some other grant programs where it's the opposite. Let's say infra traditionally goes mostly to state DOTs and less to local governments. RAISE is the other way around. So it's really a great program. It's very flexible. Almost any surface transportation project that you have will be eligible in the RAISE context. However, making sure that it's competitive in meeting multiple criteria is going to be important, as well as what Charles said, making sure we can actually get the project to construction and get it completed on time. So readiness is going to be a factor as well. And you're probably going to see the same focus that we've had on labor, good paying jobs, climate change, racial equity. So those priorities are going to be embedded in the program again this year. So with that, let me just pause. I'm happy to take any questions or cover anything else. Charles, you think it's important?
Thank you both to Charles and John. There's been a number of questions coming into the chat. So I want to start with Carol Salisbury from Wilkinsburg, the Director of Finance there. Carol, would you want to come off mute and ask your question? I can ask Carol's question in case she's looking for that unmute button. She asked if the funding is available for local government paving projects.
Yes.
Yes, this is Carol. Sorry, I had to get unmuted.
Yes, Carol, that would be eligible. However, as I mentioned before, the details of the project are going to be important. So if it was just a pure resurfacing, cut and dry vanilla, yes, totally eligible. However, we are going to want to see projects that do hit that merit criteria. So, is it serving a disadvantaged community? Is there going to be some environmental benefits? Is it helping economic competitiveness? Is there some mobility and connectivity improvement? So we're going to want to know a little bit more, but yes, right off the bat, that's certainly going to be eligible.
Oh, I appreciate it.
And John, just to jump in on what you said in terms of serving disadvantaged communities, one thing that I'll note is I think what was it, around 53% of RAISE grants went to what we call Justice 40 communities. And then when you add on the areas of persistent poverty lens as well, that number goes to 71%. And I think you saw some similar cut with our infra grants as well, where I think it was around 52% when you added both. And when mega grants come out as well, you will definitely see that very well reflected. So it's probably one thing you want to just think about generally, not just for paving projects, but also just, I think, with respect to a paving project, you may want to work with your local MPO on what formula dollars might be available through the state DOTs there. Particularly programs like the carbon reduction program might be interesting ways to fund that particular activity. So I just wanted to note that as well. John?
Yeah, that's a good point. And so, when I briefed the numbers about the competition, when we have 936 applications and we're only able to fund 166, that goes to the importance of that criteria. To really be competitive, we're going to want to see projects that really hit a number of different criteria. So just making that case and spelling that out is going to be important for leadership, our senior review team members, to really understand the importance and who's benefiting and why the project's so important to the community. Those details are very important to us.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Our next question is from Susan Conklew from Scottsdale. Susan, you want to come off mute and ask your question? I'll ask Susan's question for her. She asked if area-wide ADA improvements are appropriate for raise.
Yes, in fact, one of the debriefs that I did yesterday was one of those very types of projects where they were talking about ADA improvements along an entire corridor, multimodal, both in terms of pedestrian, sidewalks, ramps, also transit stations as well. So yes, that is a very good way to get some of those mobility and connectivity criteria points to making sure that the infrastructure that you're putting in, whether it's trying to improve drainage and runoff, where it's maybe having environmental damages, but also saying, well, we also need some pedestrian and bike lanes. It's going to be maybe a safety improvement, but also making them ADA compliant. So it's an opportunity to really elevate the infrastructure and make it compliant with as many goals as possible. So yes.
And I also will just note on the ADA front, we are getting very close to making announcements on our ASAP program, the All Stations Access Program, which is specifically for ADA transit improvements, especially for our legacy systems. So that's another program outside of RAISE that you may want to consider for your kid.
Thank you both. And our next question came from Ann Barge, who's from the council, the Central Texas Council of Governments. And it's really a question about evaluating former applications. And she asked whether there was ways to get the narratives that have been submitted for other applications, whether those are available or whether a formal open records request would be required.
Yes, and to give a little bit of context, we assisted 2 cities with applications, and one of the cities we were able to get narratives that were similar to that program. The other city, it was a quiet zone project, and there was only one other quiet zone project that was funded. So we were just curious to look at their narrative because the narratives were significantly helpful to see for the other project. The other application. And so we have not been able to get that narrative from that city. And they've acted like it's secret information, even though they were already announced as an awardee. And I don't think they understand how it works, if that makes sense.
I do understand your question. And it's interesting. There are a lot of winners from, let's say, the RAISE, Build Tiger, from this program. Once they've won, a lot of the winners will post their application online as a way both to be proud, but also to share with the community the details of what was submitted, or all the benefits that are going to be coming from the project. Really help the community understand sort of the focus, and that you have all the schedule information. So it's a helpful resource. So a lot of folks do post theirs. However, there are some, let's say, business proprietary pieces of information where applicants have said, we receive this grant funding, and we are in partnership with several, let's say, developers or a private sector entity that wants to expand operations or move into our town or city, and they have plans to, locate a new headquarters building here. And those deals aren't quite publicly available yet, or they're in negotiations, and it's not, maybe a little bit premature to share those details. So applicants, we tell applicants, this is true, everyone who reads our application narratives signs a non-disclosure agreement to protect that confidential information. However, once the project is a winner and it's going to go forward, it makes sense to sort of share the information because the information is going to be coming out. So what I would say is, we unfortunately don't provide the narratives for one application to another individual, but many of those entities have also posted their application online. Even if they haven't won, they would say, here's the application we've submitted to USDOT for this program. So they are out there with a couple of Google searches. You can find them, but unfortunately, to protect that proprietary business confidential information, we do not share the applications with others. So apologies on that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. I think we have time for about 2 more questions. One is from Beverly Habata of Capitol Heights, Maryland. She asked about timing. When would the funds be available if awarded this program year?
Good question. So we will, as I said, we have plans to publish the full notice tomorrow. The actual start date, we have late February is the actual application deadline, and we have a statutory responsibility to announce awards by June 28th. So the announcements would happen then in the summertime, June, and then at that point it will take if a project is ready to go, a couple months to get the grant agreement template filled out, approved by both USDOT and your government agency. And so they would be available on a reimbursement basis. So for all RAISE grants, it's not that we send you a check. You would do the work, you would submit an invoice to USDOT, and then we would reimburse you on an ongoing basis. So generally speaking, the funds would be available really probably at the earliest sort of in the fall timeframe. If we announce in late June, a couple months to get the grant agreements going. Now, if you have more pre-construction work, that might take up to a year. It depends. That gets back to Charles's point on the project readiness. The specifics of your project will dictate how quickly we sign that grant agreement, but we can do it as early as the fall.
And we got a question about a focus on workforce, whether or not the RAISE application criteria will have a specific focus on workforce this go round.
Yes, you will see some labor and workforce elements included in some of the criteria. So yes.
And I think I'll take delivery. So that's one last question. And for all of you who asked questions who haven't been answered yet, we'll work to get those answered and get those back to you shortly. The last question is, and it's sort of a broad one, what are the main key focus points for RAISE 2023 for the senior review team? And can we partner with our state DOTs for technical assistance if our project is awarded?
Jamie, can you repeat the first part? It was about the senior review team. I want to make sure I got that.
What are sort of the main key focus points for this program for the senior review team? I think you've hit on some of those, but we could just sort of underline those.
So, as I mentioned, because the statute does have the different requirements, both equitable split between urban and rural, project type diversity requirements, which means a mix of road, rail, transit, maritime port, airport access road projects, as well as the planning and the capital and the geographic diversity. The senior review team is looking at essentially what we do at the career level. When we do the analysis and the evaluation, we forward to the senior review team the top 2 categories. So projects that score the highly recommended and recommended. So the 2 top scores are eligible to advance to the secretary. The senior review team is looking at, how well are we meeting all these different criteria? If let's say in that batch where we say, here's the highly recommendeds, here's the recommendeds, we have a dearth of rural applications. They would say, look, let's make sure that we're looking at this list and make sure that we're providing an ample list of projects to the secretary. They're also looking at those focus areas that I talked about. If you're talking about projects that score highly recommended or recommended, they're strong projects. They will then identify which of those projects should go on for the tier 2 analysis, which is the benefit cost analysis review and the project readiness review. When that information comes back, the senior review team does often look at that project readiness information. Is this something that's risky? Are we at risk? And the reason we look at that, And the reason Charles made that mention is if we, and we've done this in the past, unfortunately, we've awarded a project, it really, aligns with the criteria, it's really a popular project. We work on it for several years, we get right to the obligation deadline, and the project doesn't have its permit or it's still going through. The funds expire, they revert to Treasury, we cancel the grant, and we can't provide you with a waiver and exception, and we can't give it to anyone else. So the folks that are, maybe right, in the second tier there, they weren't one of the 166, but they were one of 303 that made it to the secretaries. They would have loved to receive that funds to advance their project. But if we award to a project that just doesn't ever get there, it runs the risks that we lose the funding and we lose the ability to use it. So that's going to be important. But also, if there's a risk, right? If there's something about the project that might be that would hold it back for whatever reason, they're going to look at that. And on the flip side, what are the projects that really jump out to them when the secretary says, can you tell me about a project that really, is great on climate change and equity and, creating great jobs? You have one that does all three of those really rise to the top. They say, now this is great. It received high scores. It advances the priorities, and it's also low risk. They're ready to move forward. If you have that combination, that's the trifecta that you're really looking for.
This was really helpful perspective. Thank you to Charles and to John. We know how busy you are, and we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Next, we're really excited to hear about what's working in cities from two cities who successfully won raised funding, and from our policy expert who will highlight strategies for your cities to build competitive applications. We're pleased to be joined by Mary Ellen Wiederwall, President and CEO of Accelerator for America, who will be moderating a panel with Mayors Regina Romero of Tucson, Arizona, and Byron Brown of Buffalo, New York. Welcome all. Mary Ellen, over to you.
Thank you, Jamie. It's great to be with everybody this afternoon. If you're not familiar with Accelerator for America, we're a national nonprofit organization that works with mayors and their economic and community development leaders across America to find and develop real-time solutions to economic insecurity and then share, scale, and replicate those. We think one of the great tactics towards creating greater economic mobility is to invest in transit and infrastructure. So we do a lot of work in this space, and we'd love to connect with you. So we think of all of our mayors as winners, and today we have two very specific winners of raised grants. Mayor Romero from Tucson, Mayor Brown from Buffalo, welcome. Let's start off with an opening question here. Mayor Romero, we'll go to you first. Tell us about your winning application and what do you think its strengths and merits were?
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Really appreciate the introduction, especially categorizing me as a winning mayor. Absolutely. I want to thank Tom Cochran from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, of course, Bloomberg Philanthropies and Results for America for inviting us and coordinating us and putting this event together for information for other mayors throughout the country and their staffs. We're so grateful for the $25 million raise grant that the city of Tucson received. We actually hosted Secretary Buttigieg here to celebrate us receiving the $25 million raise grant for Tucson. And the way we put the application together was to tell the story of why the 22nd Street Bridge revitalization project was important for us, because it's not just about great infrastructure. It is about the infrastructure that the investment that infrastructure creates for a historically disadvantaged community. So 22nd Street Bridge connects from east to west, and it was built back in the 60s. And it is still 4 lanes. No other type of mobility can make it through it. It's very dangerous. And as a matter of fact, we've lived with the current bridge, unable to have our transit system, our buses go through it. Our school buses cannot go through it. Our ambulances and the vital first responder system could not go through the 22nd Street Bridge. So therefore, they would be diverted through disadvantaged neighborhoods that would have to eat the exhaust coming from those huge semi trucks and school buses and transit buses going through their neighborhoods. And so we told the story of why this investment through raise from the USDOT and the Biden administration was important for us because one, we wanted to serve the people south of 22nd Street. And that's the demarcation, right? South of 22nd Street, we have historically disadvantaged communities, Black, Indigenous, and Brown communities that have not seen as much investment from our governments. And we told the story of how we want to make 22nd Street Bridge multimodal, make it safe for pedestrians and bicyclists to go through it. It would save 30 minutes for school buses and for people that use 22nd Street Bridge, a 30-minute commute shorter. So many different reasons that we put together to explain why it was a good investment for the US DOT to invest in 22nd Street Bridge. We're looking at it with an eye to equity, with being able to connect to communities, one that has been historically disadvantaged. We were able to tell the story as to even, the bridge is crossing over Union Pacific Railroad, and it has been really keeping the amount of trains in the area to a minimum. So it opens up the possibility of Union Pacific of carrying more goods and services through the city of Tucson. So it even had the story even has to do with supply chain issues, right? Coming from California Bay into connecting through Tucson, through Union Pacific into the East Coast. So we told the story of the so many different reasons why this investment was important, not just to the city of Tucson, but for Union Pacific and for much more importantly, the neighbors that live in the area.
I think you hit on a lot of the important themes that we heard from Charles and John, and thinking about what are the important components of a raised grant application. And Mayor Brown, your project is a little bit different kind of project, but has some of those same themes in it too. Tell us about the strengths of your proposal in Buffalo.
Thank you very much, Mary Ellen. And I too want to thank Tom Cochran and the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and Accelerator America, and you for moderating our discussion today. At the beginning of the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, Charles Small came to visit us in Buffalo and talk about the infrastructure bill, what it contained and what it meant for cities. And it gave us the opportunity to work quickly to identify the project that we wanted to look at. The project that we chose was transforming Main Street. Main Street is a very busy thoroughfare in the city of Buffalo that bisects the eastern and western portions of our city. We knew that it was an important area where we had hospital systems, where we had entertainment, where we had job opportunities, and an area where investments were being made on both sides of Main Street to create additional jobs. So we wanted to focus on multimodal transportation opportunities. While a lot of cars drive through Main Street, there are census tracts along the Main Street corridor where we know that people, their main mode of transportation is not the car. Their main mode of transportation is probably the bus, our light rail rapid transit system, in some cases, walking and bicycle. We wanted to connect these lower income communities with economic opportunity. We wanted to connect them with the entertainment opportunities along the Main Street corridor. And this project gave us, we think, the greatest ability to impact some of our lowest income census tracts in the city of Buffalo, to make them safer, to make them multimodal, more walkable. And, we're very thankful that we were able to receive the full RAISE award of $25 million, creating an area of greater economic development, neighborhood connectivity, a focus on improving low-income communities and their access to transportation and opportunity. So those are the elements that we designed into the Transforming Main Street project that we worked on.
Well, I know we only have you all for another couple of minutes, so quick answers here on this one. So I know it wasn't always sunshine and roses while you were putting this together. You probably worked on this for multiple years. Mayor Romero, talk to us about the challenges you encountered in this and how you overcame those to get to a successful application.
Yes, the city of Tucson applied for RAISE grants a few years back during the Trump administration. And I don't think we were able to tell the story of why it was important, why this particular bridge in the city of Tucson was important, and all of the reasons why I just talked about. But this time around with the, and I want to tremendously thank Charles Small and John Augustine for their advice, right? We went back to USDOT and we said, okay, how can we tell this story? How can we really make an impact so that we have a different decision? The good thing is that the Biden administration was very closely related to the different whys I explained earlier, the equity issues, the multi-mobility of what we wanted to do. And then we also told the story of the matching funds that the city of Tucson already has for this project, right? So we're putting city impact fees to the project. We're also we collaborated closely with Pima County Board of Supervisors and their county government. They put a $70 million bond funds. We have a partnership with the Regional Transportation Authority, and they're adding to that. And then the state highway user revenue funds, we went to the state and begged and pleaded for them to invest highway user revenue funds in the city of Tucson. So we not only had the story in terms of equity, but we added to the story the many different funds and partnerships in terms of money that we have to the project. And I think that really added to us being able to receive the RAISE grant.
We persevered. Don't take no for an answer.
Yes.
Mayor Brown, what did you all encounter along the way and how'd you overcome it?
There were a number of challenges. One of the challenges was the pandemic. And being able to communicate effectively with the public. When we first started the process of looking at the Transforming Main Street project, we were able to have in-person meetings with the community. But because of the pandemic, we had to then transition to online forums, online meetings, ways that people without being in person could communicate with us, could talk about the elements that they wanted to see in the process. So just being able to communicate with our community was critically important and a challenge because of the pandemic. We also had sessions where we met outside and we did social distancing and masking to be able to get information from people. And I think that was critically important, being able to overcome that challenge. Another thing that I think is an important message here is the pre-preparation we did. Both Charles Small and John Augustine talked about project readiness. We put a lot of work into project readiness and getting our project team together even before the notice of funding opportunity came out. So we were well organized and well prepared. And so while the pandemic and communications were a challenge for us, our project team and our project readiness was in place, and that helped us to be able to compete for the RAISE grant.
Well, this has seemed an all too short time to be together, but Mayor Romero, Mayor Brown, thank you for sharing your stories, your journey. These are, as they say, marathons, not sprints. We appreciate you being with us. We know you have another event to click into, so thank you for sharing your time. And I know there's not a mayor or other person on here who wouldn't share his or her story. So let's make sure we continue to learn from each other. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Thank you, Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Romero. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our mayors. Mary Ellen, building on Mayor Romero and Mayor Brown's presentation, we'd love to get your thoughts on what cities, especially those who applied for funding in 2022 and didn't receive it, should be doing now to prepare for 2023. We heard Mayor Romero talk about getting that feedback, listening to it, implementing it. We'd love to get some other insights from your work.
Absolutely. Well, not only do we have this national perspective, but many of you know I had the joy of leading economic and community development for my hometown, Louisville, Kentucky, for a number of years. And in that time, we managed to win a Tiger grant for a BRT line. And after several attempts, finally landed a RAISE grant here in town this year. So my number one takeaway is you have to, persevere. You have to stay committed to the cause. You're probably not going to win the first time you try. And in fact, you might make it to the secretary's desk a few times before you get to the next step. But there are some things, obviously, you can do to be better prepared. And we've heard some really important themes today that I think bear repeating, particularly in this time now with the way that these RAISE grants are styled. And we heard the message loud and clear from Charles and John around the focus more than just the project itself, but how is it impacting climate? How is it bringing greater equity to your community? We heard Mayor Romero talk very specifically about the divide in her community and what this piece of physical infrastructure meant for that. I'm sure every city on this call has a story about that. Everybody's got a 22nd Street and 9th Street. Many of these divides tragically are named after Martin Luther King in your community. How can you use this opportunity to create greater equity and opportunity? The other big message that got some emphasis earlier is around workforce. And think about how you can bring a greater and holistic perspective on the workforce for this. So this is something we've been very focused on at Accelerator. Earlier this year, we published our gold standard playbook for workforce development. I think some of you all have tapped into that through some other webinars, but take a look at that. And how can you bring this opportunity to more workforce development programs? Think about who your partners can be in pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs in your community, and ensuring that this historic opportunity with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law actually helps our lower wage workers move up into family supporting wage jobs. Great opportunity for that. The other big message on this is around partnership and readiness. And that just kind of rounds out the application. You can have the best idea and kind of check all of those other boxes, but you got to bring some friends along with you. Very few of these projects, no matter what sector they're in, exist in isolation. So if you've got a council of governments, use that. Be working within your MPO, thinking about how you're reaching not just across the local, state, regional and federal places, but thinking about all of the partners who could be with you. And while the matching requirements aren't what they used to be, thank goodness, when you can bring financial matching financial assets to this, particularly when you think about what you can do with a ballot initiative, for example, in your community, or what can you do in this last couple of years as we have ARPA funds and perhaps the monies that locally you've been able to offset with those ARPA funds, how can you make additional commitments that help really add to the power and impact of the project that you want to present? So I'll pause by saying with this that there's a lot of questions about eligibility. Is this eligible or not? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So thinking about what you're eligible for, but thinking about what makes a winning application. And the best place to go for that is look at who won this year. And just look at examples like we see from Tucson and Buffalo and say, okay, I see where DOT is going with this. Let me match that.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And we'll be sharing out in the follow-up materials ways for you all to get some more information about those projects, including the press releases that DOT issued on those projects. I want to invite everyone. We have some time for discussion. And so want to invite people to share their insights, their questions, their comments. We'll try to get to a few if we can make them succinct. And maybe just to start us off, one question that we saw come in, Marianne, I think you might be able to touch on, it's just about that project readiness piece. The question about, how detailed do you need to be about engineering and design needs? And what did you find in your experience applying in Louisville?
Well, this is also one of those great examples where sometimes you got to spend some money to make some money. Highly advise retaining expert advice on this. Hire an engineering firm who has had many successful raise, build, Tiger grants. You probably have some wonderful expertise on staff, but our staffs in City Hall do everything every day. And so they don't spend every day thinking about the requirements of a raise grant. So, if you can, or if you don't have city money, go to a local philanthropic source, go to a foundation, see if, you can raise $35,000, $50,000, $75,000 to retain some expert counsel on this, because they will most likely make your application stronger. And so it's definitely something to think about. And to that specific question, the more you have one of those A&E firms involved, the more likely you're going to be able to get more detailed, not just in meeting the requirements of the NOFO, but advancing the project to a place where it's going to meet that readiness threshold that we heard so strongly from our USDOT friends.
Great. And I think we have time for one more. I received an inquiry from Carly Foster. Carly, are you able to, from Warwick, New York, which happens to be my favorite place to pick apples and berries. Carly, are you able to come off mute to talk a little bit about your ADA project?
Sure. I was having a hard time understanding whether or not walkability and bikeability improvements would be eligible on their own. So for example, if we wanted to put ADA sidewalks and other improvements along a state road that bisects a community and cuts neighborhoods off from being able to safely walk to school or to the park. Walkability and bikeability are key core elements of community mobility, particularly in rural communities. And Warwick is a densely populated, rural community that has a lot of challenges around pedestrian mobility and safe bikeability.
So this is a great example of a project that's definitely eligible. So then the question becomes, how can you go from eligible to a winning application? And so you're hitting on several of the important themes there around connectivity, around multimodal. Can you connect in an equity component? Can you connect in a workforce component? So thinking about how you can take the core of that and really expand upon it for maximum impact. That is my best advice, listening to that description. I think you are down the right path and on your way to a winning application if you can pull in some of those additional components.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you to everyone for your questions, your comments, your insights. Thank you to Mary Ellen. We're going to continue this discussion. I mean, there's so many good projects and questions in the chat, so we'll make sure we're following up with you all to connect with you and keep this community and this dialogue going. Now I just want to put up some Zoom polls. We are always trying to learn how we can better serve you and make sure that you're getting access to information resources that are helpful in developing your applications. So I'll give you a minute to fill that out. And then I'm going to jump to a quick little demo of something that we have on local infrastructure hub site that I want to make sure everyone knows is there and knows how to take advantage of. And that is our opportunity finder. We know that cities are trying to navigate lots of different funding opportunities. And so we partnered with East of Us, which is a grants management software company. And we made a tool that's available for all on our site. You can navigate to it by pressing the funding button up in the navigation bar of the Local Infrastructure Hub's website. And here you'll be able to find information about all the federal grant opportunities. You can sort it by agency, topic, or by eligible applicant, for instance, local governments. I'll just show you quickly how it works. If you were to do a keyword search for RAISE, the program we talked about today, you'll see here the grant program. And then they've had people go in and sort of try to simplify the information about the opportunity. So you'll find all the sort of basic information about it on the summary page. You'll find out who's eligible to apply and when the application is open, when the application closes, and any webinars that they're having to help stakeholders to receive more information about the program. You can also, we heard today from Mayor Romero about the great work that she did lining up partners and match. You'll learn whether there is a match required and what that is and what can be used, what's eligible as to meet that match. And then something I thought was really important to include was a previously funded application. So for each of the legacy programs, you'll be able to look at a application that was funded in a previous year. So here it's the Brooklyn Bridge Gateway project, and you'll be able to see their application. So we're happy to provide more in-depth tutorials, but wanted to make sure that you're all availing yourself of that. We know that there's going to be a lot of funding opportunities opening in the beginning of 2023 and want to help you navigate that and prioritize. Lastly, we want to remind all small and medium-sized cities that it's not too late to register for the next round of technical assistance boot camps the Local Infrastructure Hub is running through the National League of Cities. These boot camps, which kick off in January, are focused on 5 grant opportunities, including energy efficiency and conservation block grants. So those are for communities of 35K or over, the top 5 in the state. The electrical vehicle and charging infrastructure, roadway safety planning, and roadway safety implementation, the 2 different types of grants through Safe Streets and Roads for All, and brownfields activities. Registration for this round of boot camps closes this Friday, December 16th, so please be sure to register soon. And if you need more information or you want to apply, the link is in the chat. You can always reach out to us for more information. I really want to thank you all for joining us today, and a special thank you to our program participants. As we heard from Charles, there's going to be a lot of funding opportunities coming your way, and we know that means you'll be putting in long hours developing transformative projects and competitive applications to deliver real results for your communities. We're grateful for your service, and we hope you get a well-deserved rest during the holiday season. It's been my honor to be your MC today, and I just really want to acknowledge the historic nature of today. President Biden is about to sign the Respect for Marriage Act. We look forward to reconnecting for more webinars and programs in the new year, and I want you to be on the lookout for invitations to our January sessions. Those will be coming out shortly. So thank you all. We wish you a happy holidays and a very happy and healthy new year, and we'll see you next time.